So I would like to give a shout out to the group in Arkansas who watches our video podcasts every week. You see, it turns out that this particular group had their Unity Church closed down. And so they watch our podcast every Monday night, thanks to Don Randolph, who makes it possible. So we're just going to say, we love you and we bless you. Would you join me? We love you and we bless you. Yeah, awesome. And it's really a shout out to anybody who's watching us on the video or listening to us online. We appreciate you. You're part of our online community. And anytime we can support you with prayer or in any other way, you just let us know. Right? Right, yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, our good friend, Patty O'Quigley. Our good friend, Patty O'Quigley, moved into a tiny hamlet in Ireland. And of course, the first thing he did was to check out the local pub, which is always the center of community. And he went in and he ordered himself 3 pints of ale, all at once. And so the bartender served him. And then the next time our good friend Patty O'Quigley went into the pub, he ordered 3 pints of ale. And the next time, and the next time. And so people were starting to get curious, and finally the bartender asked him, he said, why is it that you order, 3 pints of ale each time? And Patty explained that he has 2 brothers, and they live, the 3 of them, very far apart, and so this is their tradition. This is how they honor each other. Anytime they go into a pub anywhere in the world, the brothers are all going to order 3 pints in honor of one another. Well, the bartender thought that was kind of sweet, kind of cool, and so time marched on until one spring, Patty went into the pub, and he ordered 2 pints of ale. Oh, the bartender was worried, and so were the other townspeople. I mean, clearly something had happened to one of the brothers, and so the bartender went up to Patty and said, I just want to express my condolences, on behalf of your brother and all. And Patty shook his head, and he said, well, you only ordered the two pints of ale, and we're just really sorry for your loss. And Patty shook his head and said, oh, no, my brother, he's fine, it's me, myself. You see, I've given up drinking for Lent. So we are in the season of Lent, that season that moves right up to Easter. And Lent is a time of spiritual preparation, whatever that might look like for you. And sometimes there's a tradition that people will give up something in particular for Lent. Maybe anybody here give up something for Lent? Anybody? Yeah? So some people give, not a whole lot. You could try Patty's, his method, and it wouldn't be like giving up anything at all. I think I'll give up chocolate is what I'll give up. Yeah, and just eat, Oh, my mind is just digressing. I won't go into that, so never mind. Anyway, so some people do give up chocolate or alcohol or video games or something, and the idea is that you give up something that you do frequently, and when you might otherwise go to indulge in that behavior, instead you stop yourself and you think about God. You become mindful of spirit. So that this time leading up to Easter is really a time of reflection and of spiritual preparation of your heart for that Easter Sunday resurrection experience. And sometimes what people will do instead of giving up something is they'll make a commitment to a new spiritual practice of some sort, a little bit longer meditation or some other spiritual reading or something. So there's all manners of ways of experiencing Lent. And I've been reading in a book by a woman named Mary DeMuth, and the book is called Everything. And she talks about asking yourself, what is holding you back? You see, Easter is the resurrection. So what holds you back from that resurrection experience? What is holding you back in your life in some way? And she uses a term that really spoke to me. The term she used was the uncaged life. The uncaged life. And when I read that, it was such a visual term. I could just see someone stepping out of this cage that had been holding them back into that Easter resurrection experience. She says there are several things that cage us in life that keep us from really experiencing the abundant life. We're going to talk about two of them today. The first one we're going to talk about that she says holds us back is our past. Your past. Your stories. She talks about the stories of your life that happened in the past, and yet you bring them with you, right? We bring them with us. And even though our stories, no matter how traumatic or how rich, they've all helped to form who we are today. And so from that perspective, we can be grateful for them. But there's this aspect of us that brings them along as our identity, those stories. And let me read to you how it is that Mary puts this. She's talking about her old stories. And she says, I no longer need to be defined by the trials of the past. I'm not Mary who suffered, though it is part of my story. I am Mary who has been set free. And then she goes on and she says, yet we crawl back there, don't we? We camp in the I was statements rather than the I am statements. We camp in the I was statements rather than the I am statements. And then she goes on to list some of her I was statements, part of her story. She says, I was molested. I was abandoned. I was injured. I was a failure. I was sick. I was insignificant. I was overlooked. I was wild. What are your I was statements? What are the stories that you keep bringing along, dragging them with you, or, as it were, caging you in from really being who you are today? And so she invites us into the I am. And we know that I am is really another name for God. It's how God introduced itself to Moses, right? I am that I am. And so she goes on and she says that God calls each of us to be an am, A-M, to be an am. Still, we live caged by our past, by our I was statements. These steel cages have become comfortable to us because they're known. And I want to pause here for a moment and say, that's often why it is that we hold on to these stories and we hold on to this past, because it's comfortable. Sometimes it's easier for us to be who we've always been, who we were in the past and who people saw us in the past, than to be who we are today. So she goes on, she says, the I was statements define us. We've made our nest in the past, letting shackled living become our normal. Soaring is too scary, too new. We'd rather live chained to our comfort zone. That last line's a powerful one. We'd rather live chained to our comfort zone. So if we're going to go to Easter and have the resurrection experience, let me tell you, folks, Easter is a whole new paradigm shift. If we're going to go into that symbolic Easter experience for you and me, then we've got to step out of the things that hold us back, our past stories and the stories that we tell. And how do you know that you've got stories that you're hanging on to? Well, maybe you've met someone that within just moments of meeting them, they're telling you about a long ago past trial. And here's the thing. I'm not one to criticize that because I know that those stories are important. But if you're telling them to somebody the first words out of your mouth when you meet them, then maybe they've become too important. Maybe the past is defining you instead of just contributing to who you are. Because you are more than your past, whatever that past was. You are more than your past, and you are a new person today. So what would it look like for you to be an am today? Who are you today as opposed to who you were? And what words have you believed about yourself that may have been true or not, but they keep you caged to the past? So I just want you to kind of hold that in your thinking as we go through the morning. What past experiences have caged you in to keep you from that resurrection experience? We talked last week some about dark nights of the soul experiences. Those life experiences that take you to your core. And we talked about how sometimes part of you is left in the shadow of yourself that you don't allow yourself to see, and that it is important to bring those to light and see those experiences and see how they've impacted you so that you can be blessed and move on. And that brings us to the second thing that Mary DeMuth says stands in our way of stepping out of these cages. And that is our need to control. Our need to control change. And it, change happens. It's been said that change is the one constant of life, right? And so it is impossible. It's impossible to control change. And yet, we want to try, most of us. We want to try. I love how she puts it. She says, when trials inevitably knock on my door, my response is to clean my house, align the cans in my pantry, create order from chaos. When God asks me to risk for his sake, I create lists in my head about why it's not logical to do so. I'd rather live a controlled life than let Jesus take me on unfamiliar roads. I'd rather live a controlled life than let the Christ within guide me to someplace I've never been before, right? And I've been there, let me tell you. It is comforting to try to control things. When everything else is in chaos, there is great comfort for me in folding a stack of towels nice and neatly and stacking them in the cupboard in the bathroom and just see that nice, neat order stack of towels when everything else is falling apart. And so it is that we try to control things to keep the change from happening, but that's not possible. It's just not possible. Change is what happens. And here's the interesting thing, is that if you give yourself to change, if you surrender to it and stop resisting, then there's a natural momentum that happens to change. There's a natural momentum that will take you forward. Anybody here like roller coasters? Wow. Okay, good. Good for you. Anybody like roller coasters in life? Some of you do, yeah. Some people like change. I don't like roller coasters either way, in life or at Worlds of Fun. In fact, I will tell you that the one time my husband ever betrayed me was when we were still dating. We were early dating, actually, and he took me to Astro World in Houston and said, let's ride the roller coaster. I said, well, I don't think I like roller coasters so much. Oh, come on, it'll be fun. So I thought, well, maybe it'll be fun this time. Not so much. In fact, I think it was the first time he heard me curse coming down that roller coaster. Roller coasters do that to me. And really inopportune times, too, because I was chaperoning my daughter's 8th grade class at Worlds of Fun one time here. And that's another story. But anyway, they heard things they weren't supposed to hear from the chaperone, I can tell you that. So I don't much like roller coasters. And I remember that one of the first ones I ever rode was when I was just a young child with my dad. It was called the Mousetrap. Anybody remember that ride? So the way the Mousetrap worked was like this. You'd be in the car. I was in my car with my dad. And the car would go forward and then jerk stop and then turn. And go this way and then it would jerk and then turn. And you didn't know when it was going to turn, which way it was going to turn. And by the end of the ride, literally, I was down. This was before they had all the safety things they have now. I was down at the foot of this car, down by my dad's feet. I was, hidden because I was so scared. And in some regards, that's how it is when we meet the changes in life. And all those trials that Mary was talking about in life are really about changes, and that we're afraid of encountering those changes that we're afraid of encountering. There's one thing that's more certain, though, than change. There's one constant in life that is more certain than change, and that's God. That's God. Because in the midst of the change, God is there. But life changes, relationships change, bosses change, finances change, health changes, all manner of things change, and God is the only true constant in the midst of that. And so in her book, Mary DeMuth, who was a Christian missionary, I guess still is, she asks this question: is God your everything? Is God your everything? In other words, is there a way in your life in which you put God first and know that no matter what the change is, God will be there? That's a question I'd never asked in those terms before. Because when we're facing the unknown, that's when we need to remember that God is everything and God is bigger than whatever. It's when we need to call forth courage. And we're in this month of courage. We're exploring courage every week of this month as we lead up to Easter. And the thing about courage is, I found I don't need courage when everything is going on status quo, right? When it's the same old week after week, when one thing happens after another just as normal, I don't need courage. It's when I'm facing the unknown that I need courage. So we have an affirmation that I'm going to invite you to speak with me about courage. If you'll say this with me together: I boldly face challenge and uncertainty. It's the uncertainty of it that's scary, isn't it? It's the uncertainty of it that scares us. That's the part of change we don't like. If we knew exactly what was going to happen with the change, then we wouldn't be so scared. But you never know. You never know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen this afternoon. I will tell you, yesterday I had a first as a minister. I've performed many weddings in my time, but the sweetest, cutest thing happened yesterday, and this has never happened before. So, in fact, Charlie Carter was with me. He was doing sound, and we were up at Wyandotte Lake. And the way the wedding venue was set up was there was a stage for the minister and the bride and the groom, and we were up a couple of steps, and then the rest of the wedding party was, fanned out on the floor. So the wedding party had all assembled, and I was there with the groom. The bride hadn't come in yet. It was time for the flower girl to walk down crying, as she did. Kids do that. She walked down crying. I don't know why we have to dress our kids up like that. But anyway, she walked. But then the ring bearer came in, not crying, happy as he could be, walked right up the steps, and just stood right beside me. And I just looked at him and, patted him, and then I pointed to the row where he was supposed to go sit. I said, "You want to go sit over there?" And he thought about it, and he walked down the steps, and he looked over at the row of chairs and decided there really wasn't one there that he liked, so he came right back up and stood right next to me. And he stood there for the whole service. He just clung right to my leg, but he wasn't scared. He was not scared. He was just hugging me. It was the sweetest thing. And so, my mind went to, okay, now, does anybody care that he's up here? Because I don't, and he's happy. And one thing I've learned as a minister, if a kid is happy in the wedding, you just let them do whatever they're doing. If they are happy and quiet, you just let them have at it. So I just decided to go with it, to surrender to this unexpected turn of events. And he stayed there the whole time. Periodically, I hugged him, I patted him. And here's the thing. You know how I said that I feel like I just stepped on him when I moved over? Anybody else? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on you, sweetheart. So I was so in the memory of yesterday. I could just feel him there. So when change happens, you can resist it and steal against it. And if you do, you will be caged. If, however, you surrender into it and call on your everything God, then you will feel a different momentum, a different energy. You'll be sourced by God energy. And that's what happened with that little boy, because he opened my heart, and it opened everybody else's heart too, even bigger and fuller than it had been before. I know all change is not as easy to surrender to as a 5-year-old little boy. But we can surrender to it, and when we do, we step out. We step out of the cage. In her book, DeMuth talks about some missionary work that she and her family did in France. And as it turned out, by any external standards, it was a complete failure. Nothing they tried worked. She prayed and prayed, couldn't get clear. It was a true dark night of the soul experience for her. There were times when she just couldn't find God in the midst of it, and that's what tends to typify a dark night of the soul experience. They came back from from France back to the States, and people asked her, and she even asked herself, would you trade France? Would you trade that experience that you had there? And as she reflected upon it, she decided that no, she would not. Because in the end, she had felt close to God. And she put a post on her fan page on Facebook. And she asked the question, when has God seemed closest to you? And the answers that she got surprised her. Let me read you some of the answers that she got on her Facebook page when she asked that question, when has God seemed closest to you? During labor, when my preemie daughter was born. During the illness and death of my mother and sister. When I found out I was adopted. Waiting to see if my dad survived a horrific motorcycle accident. When I had a heart attack at 38 years old. During my separation. Now, all of those, most of them, are what you might call a trial, a challenge. Perhaps a very painful experience. In any case, a change, right? And yet it was in the midst of those profound life changes that people said they felt closest to God. The opportunity when you are on your knees and praying hard, literally on your knees or metaphorically on your knees and praying hard, the opportunity to know God as your everything is enormous. We grow most in our times of change and when life seems to steal our control away. And so, we're talking about Easter coming in a couple of weeks here. And what I want to say is that Easter followed the crucifixion. Easter followed the crucifixion. And that's the way it is for you and me too. I'm not saying the only way to experience the resurrection is to have a crucifixion, but when you go through a crucifixion experience, that means when your whole life changes or is shaken at depth. That's the symbolic crucifixion that happens in your and my life. And when you go through that, on the other side, and it can take a very long time to get to the other side, on the other side, that's the resurrection. You step out of the cage. You step out of the cage of resistance. You step out of the cage of past stories. You step out of the cage of fear of change and of a need to control. You step out of that cage and then enter a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift means a total shift in your worldview. That's the resurrection. And that's what we're heading to this time of year. Although the truth is it can happen anytime. It doesn't just happen in the Easter calendar, right? It just doesn't happen in the church calendar. The resurrection is possible anytime. You choose to live the uncaged life and step out. And step out. Somebody shared with me after the first service, she said, oh my gosh, I didn't get it. And she then began to enumerate all the different changes that have happened in her life lately. Everything you can imagine, from job to location. She's about to move from here to someplace else, and she's been an enormous change in turmoil. She said, but now I'm ready to live the resurrection. I'm ready for that. So, the message today is about the uncaged life. Stepping out of whatever cages are that you have found yourself in or that you have created through your thinking. Because in the end, it's all about our thoughts are what tie us to our past experiences. And our thoughts have that need to control. So I'm going to invite you to help me close the lesson today with a series of I am statements. If you'll speak, repeating after me. I am free of fear.
I am free of fear.
I am free of my past.
I am free of my past.
I am free of the need to control.
I am free of the need to control.
And I am free I am free to live the abundant life. I am free to live the abundant life. And you are. God bless you.